is Tom Kozlik, the head of public policy and municipal strategy at HilltopSecurities. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this episode of our Hilltop Talks Politics and Finance podcast series for 2024. During this Hilltop Talks discussions with subject matter experts, we consider topics that intersect the areas of politics and finance at the federal, state, and local levels in the United States. We often concentrate on issues related to U.S. public finance and the municipal bond market. And so this is where we find ourselves today. 2024 is winding down. The 2024 elections are over, and the time to assess the political landscape for 2025, for the 119th Congress, and for the second Trump administration is here. And what better guest to have than Chris Iacovella? We spoke with Chris back in the spring of 2024 about the political scene, the landscape back then. For those of you who don't know Chris is the Chief Executive Director of the ASA, the American Securities Association. He is a leading national financial services and policy expert. His opinions are sought after by regulators, Congress, the media, and financial market participants and observers. We're very lucky that he's been able to take some time out of his very, very busy schedule to discuss with us today the ins and outs of Washington, and specifically discuss what he's expecting to happen in 2025, especially with tax policy. Chris, did you think back in April that there would have been a red wave and Republicans would command the type of mandate that they've created in November?
I had a feeling that, and I think as you and I had spoken last time, that there would be an overwhelming move towards the Republican ticket. I wasn't sure if Republicans could keep the House, though, and it's a very, very slim margin that they did manage to do so. But I was pretty confident that given the state of the economy, inflation, and a lot of the chaos surrounding the current administration, quite frankly, the culture that was created by the current administration through the use of administrative agencies to intimidate and in some cases extort fines from regulated entities, they created such a negative atmosphere for business to flourish and to hire that it became untenable. And I think you saw that move more and more into the red category as we got closer to the election. And I really think that the way that this administration handled itself and governed itself vis-a-vis the American people and American businesses, why they're out.
So, what are your initial takeaways from the 2024 elections? What I'm wondering. I mean, I watched actually not even just on election day, the day before. I was glued to my television. What were you thinking on election night, and what were you thinking the days just after?
Well, on election night, I was not surprised at all that Trump had a mandate, that he was going to have a mandate, that he would get the popular vote. Just talking to people, going around the country, listening to regular folks talk, people are very upset about how high the prices were for everything. Business leaders were upset that they were continually getting fined for what you would call nominal or very administrative violations, and they were getting fined at levels that would suggest that they did something egregious. And it was happening in every single industry by every regulator across the Biden government. And I think that the American people throughout their history have proven that over time they're always going to course correct when things get out of hand. And that's what happened. And that's what I was thinking was, thank goodness that happened, because we had gone way too far in one direction. There was a deep ideology that was seeping into the administrative state as it related to some discriminatory measures that they were pushing down on entities, and also the way that they viewed business and regular people through a lens of arrogance. And if you don't agree with us, well, then we're going to intimidate you using lawfare. And that wasn't just happening to the president; it was happening to regulated entities. And I think you saw people's reaction at the ballot box, and I was, very thankful that happened because we can't have that in this country. That's the way you ruin a good country.
So infrastructure. In President Trump's 2016 campaign, infrastructure was an important element, if I remember correctly. Do you think that infrastructure is going to be a political priority for President-elect Trump and the 119th Congress?
I think it depends on what type of infrastructure you're talking about. I think you'll have you'll have quick relief on permitting. I heard the president today, actually, at the New York Stock Exchange talk about how he was going to immediately approve permitting of projects above a certain dollar threshold. Well, that will certainly improve the business climate and the breaking ground on infrastructure projects. I think they're going to take a hard look at the IRA, and they're going to claw back a lot of that money that wasn't spent, and they may cancel some of the projects that have just started where the amount of money that's supposed to go to them is very high. And I think that's going to be used to help to pay for and offset some of what we're going to talk about in a little bit in tax relief. So the infrastructure builds are going to there will still be infrastructure. It's just going to be the way that it's focused, and it's not going to be focused on wasteful projects and industries that need government funding in order to survive. It's going to be focused on promoting American prosperity through energy production and broadband, strengthening the electrical grids across the country and to harden them from cyber attacks, and also to expand energy output so that we can support the innovative tech industry and particularly AI. I think that's where you're going to redirect money on your infrastructure spend, and you're going to take it away from wasteful things like solar panels and windmills that don't help us.
And that could be part of the first reconciliation bill, perhaps.
Yes, I think it will be.
So is there a larger message, or are there larger takeaways from the appointments President Trump is making that voters, business leaders, and public entities should be taking away right now?
Yeah, I think that the animal spirits of business and the business climate and people's ability to be innovative and start business is going to take off again. You aren't going to have a wet blanket thrown on you by some bureaucrat who thinks that just because they're in a position of power that they could dictate to you how your business should be run or whether you should even be able to start one. That's a huge difference. And that's what I meant by the culture that the Biden administration implemented over the last 4 years with its lawfare, its fines, its administrative procedures. I mean, it's rulemaking, constant burden to the business community, and it forced the transfer of wealth to the professional class, consultants, lawyers, accountants. These people sucked so much money out of the real economy that could have been put toward a productive use for research and development and hiring that it's just amazing. And I hope somebody does a study on it, because that's how you drown out productive economic growth and prosperity throughout the country. You just refunnel all of this money to people in the Acela corridor between Washington and New York who just live off of the administrative state. That's what's going to end. And I think they've made it very clear that they are going to shrink the administrative state. I think that's a goal of the Doge group with Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, is exactly to do that. And that is why you have a different climate amongst business leaders and amongst Americans. I mean, people are excited again. They're happy to be American. They want to move forward.
Yeah, the business climate's definitely changing. The small business confidence levels have really jumped in recent days. So you're definitely right about those animal spirits. So what?
Yeah. And in getting the current regulators out of these positions and rooting out these career people who are in there who believe that they have some authority to be able to tell business people how to run their business, that's got to end. And that's going to take some time. But you've got 4 years to be able to get these people to retire, to reorganize agencies, to RIF these people if they don't comply with the new way of how you're going to treat regulated entities. There needs to be more public discussion as it relates to how you move forward with policy making. And quite frankly, a lot of the policy making needs to revert back to Congress, because those are the people who the Americans voter put in office to make policy decisions. They did not put people in administrative agencies and staffers in administrative agencies in charge of making any policy. That is and that has proliferated for far too long, and it went into hyperdrive in this administration, and it's going to be a focus for the Trump administration, and I'm happy that it will be, and we're going to help them root out a lot of these problems as much as we possibly can. We know where they are.
So let's peel back what it is that we're expecting. Do we have a big picture sense yet of how President-elect Trump and lawmakers are likely to approach 2025?
I mean, the big picture, the Trump administration is going to have to do what the voters put him in there to do, which is to fix the immigration, stop this migration of illegal aliens across our border, get some of these people who came in here over the past 4 years out of the country and force them to get on the list legally, like my parents had to do, and other people's, and then focus on the energy production, as we talked about before. That's permitting reform, that's leases. Those reducing the cost of energy is going to immediately bring down inflation. That is a very important thing. Then you have to refocus on defense. You have to figure out how to reform our military in a way that doesn't focus on race, that focuses on real threats and how we have to allocate resources to defend this country. And I think that will be the first reconciliation bill. And there's going to be a lot in there. And you can pay for a lot of it with the IRA, which was just a partisan package that was jammed through. And there's a lot of unused revenue in there.
That was going to be my next question, do you think the Republicans are going to use that first reconciliation bill to pass the GOP's top priorities like immigration, like increasing energy production, like defense spending maybe by early February? I mean, you kind of answered that already, but there's been talk, correct me if I'm wrong, over the last week or so of some lawmakers wanting to potentially include tax reform in that bill as well. Do you think it's going to be one? You think it's going to be two? How do you think that's going to play out?
Tax reform is extremely complicated, and it's possible that simple portions of tax reform could be put in that bill, but the broader discussions on how to reform our code, how to redirect money, where the incentives are going to be towards what industries, what the pay-fors are going to look like. Those are extremely difficult discussions to have, and I believe that those are going to be kicked into the back half of the year because the tax cuts actually don't expire until the end of 2025. So you do have quite a few months to be able to have a public debate about what people are thinking about. And it's going to be very difficult to deal with what we just talked about and tax reform in the first 3 months of the year, considering that we have to raise the debt ceiling and fund the government in that period of time.
Right. So what do you think lawmakers' priorities are going to be with tax reform by the end of next year?
I think lowering corporate tax rates, hopefully lowering individual rates. There's going to be a lot of scrutiny on pay-fors, and what I mean by that is last time we saw the SALT deduction be a casualty. They could look now this time at the municipal tax exemption. They could look at the mortgage interest deduction, what the levels are of those. They might not propose to scrap them entirely, but they may start to chip away at the fullness of those exemptions. that's going to cause a lot of lobbying and pushback from the industries that are affected. But I think the broader picture is that he's got to bring down the individual rates, and he wants to bring down the corporate rates so that he can stimulate hiring and reinvestment back into our country so that wages will go up again. And then there's going to be tariffs that they put on it. Tariff discussions are going to be part of all of this. And at the end of the day, the United States is the world's consumer. We consume all of the goods of Europe and of China and Asia. And so the idea that Trump wasn't elected to put tariffs on, or that tariffs are going to be super inflationary, it's just another wrong-headed message from economists who have been completely wrong over the course of the past 25 years about how global trade would actually work and what impact it would have on societies and on politics. So, the administration knows what they're doing. Trump said he was going to put tariffs on Mexico and Canada. Well, immediately you have the Prime Minister of Canada fly down to Mar-a-Lago to have conversation with him about some of that stuff. So at the end of the day, it's our market. It's driven on credit. And whether you like that or not, when we can have that discussion another day, it's driven on credit by the consumer, and those consumers, the individuals in this country, buy. And other countries need access to our markets. And so whether those tariffs end up helping to offset some of the budget deficits that we have, it remains to be seen, and how targeted he is or how widespread he is on his implementation of the tariffs will also be part of the tax discussion, because it's going to impact how much revenue comes into the government.
So you mentioned salt. That was an issue back in 2017. It was an issue in 2021 when some lawmakers threatened to hold up fiscal policy if the salt cap wasn't repealed. Do you think that salt is going to be an issue of contention in 2025? And I'm wondering who you're seeing support for it and against it. And I'm wondering if you also have a sense of how important it is to President Trump and lawmakers.
I don't know how important it is to President Trump. Obviously, the lawmakers who care about it deeply are the ones in the blue states, because they are the ones who benefited from that deduction. And there are Republicans and Democrats who are representing voting constituencies in those states. And so those folks will advocate very loudly for the reinstallation of that exemption up to its full limit. And I think that there'll be a fight about that. Now, the question is how do the votes shake out? Because the House is extremely tight. And I think that because of the narrowness of the votes and the number of Republicans in blue states who might get pressured, that it's a real discussion. And then you have to look at, well, what are they going to have to use to offset to pay for that deduction? And that's why you need a full year to have these discussions in public and have people put forth policy arguments.
So in 2017, Congressman Brady was an important lawmaker to watch. Who are going to be the important lawmakers to watch in 2025 with regard to tax policy?
I believe Chairman Jason Smith on the Ways and Means Committee in the House is going to be extremely important to watch. Vern Buchanan is also on that committee. Jody Arrington. Those three, they'll help to drive the debate. On the other side, you're going to have Mike Crapo, who really understands these issues and has for a very long time. And I think, obviously Senate and House leadership on both sides of the aisle are going to be deeply embedded in the details of the debate as it moves forward. So I think at some point you will see they'll try to work with across the aisle in the Senate and in the House. and at some point you will see Republicans break off and just go down a partisan path. But it's possible that there could be quite a few Democratic votes in the House and in the Senate for some of these measures, because they're not, they're aimed at helping the country, and they've heard a lot from their constituencies. So I think that those are the groups that you really have to focus on.
Do you think that the municipal bond tax exemption tax expenditure is going to be on the radar for lawmakers to use in 2025?
Yes, I do. The municipal tax exemption is a big pay for. It's something that was brought up by the previous Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and floated to be part of the TCJA previously. And I think that they're going to look at it just like they'll look at every other big expenditure, big exemption that costs money in the top 10 of those, and which the municipal tax exemption is. And I think that this is one where blue states and red states should find common ground to make sure that they continue to preserve the exemption, and that governors of each of those states weigh in with their senators and with their representatives to make sure that it's not touched.
Let me ask you one more question before we finish up, and it's going to be about the tax exemption threat, kind of from a historical perspective compared to what it might be facing in 2025. Over the last decade plus, there's been a little bit of a threat to the tax exemption. It was talked about, and it was an elimination of it was proposed by Bull Simpson in 2010. There was a threat to it during the fiscal cliff. Private activity bonds were put on the chopping block in 2017. That didn't happen, but the sector did lose the ability to use advance refundings with tax exempts. How is it that the threat is the same or different going into 2025 compared to the last decade plus, in your opinion?
In my view, the reason why it's different this time, and everybody says that, but the reason why it's different this time is because all of the top 10 most highest costing tax exemptions, of the muni bond tax exemption being one of them, are going to be severely scrutinized because of the amount of our deficit. That's the game changer in this situation. When you are paying the amount of interest on our debt that is equal to our defense spending, you really have to scrutinize and analyze every single part of what you're spending is mandatory spending, discretionary spending, exemptions, how you're allocating tax credits. Everything is up for debate. And that's why I think it's going to take a full year for the public to have a debate about exactly what it is we wanted to keep and what we want to eliminate. And that's why I think that, we can't take any chances as it relates to the municipal bond tax exemption, because, it's going to be on the block and reviewed and scrutinized just like every other exemption is going to be. And with the deficit as high as it is, obviously we're trying to use the tax code to stimulate economic growth so that we can bring in more revenue and offset some of the spending. But if we don't offset the spending and we're just going to try to grow our way out of this, you're going to have people focus on what those big exemptions are and try to shoot at them as much as possible. And so that's why I think this one is particularly important, because the debt's so high and the amount of accumulation of the current deficit just keeps rising and rising. So that's why I think I say what I do about that.
Well, the threat is there. It sounds like we should be checking in with you in 2025 to see how things are going with the first reconciliation package, what's happening with tax policy. I hope you'll come back and talk to us in the first or second quarter of 2025, Chris.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I always enjoy being on here, and thank you again for inviting me.
Great. Thanks for joining us, and thanks very much to those who tuned in and downloaded our recording today. We really appreciate you listening. I appreciate Chris for joining us today. I really enjoyed our discussion. For those of you who are interested, you can see the recent Hilltop Securities economic and municipal commentary and listen to our podcasts by going to hilltopsecurities.com/commentary. And you can follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thanks again, everyone. We look forward to bringing you more color in the future related to topics that intersect the world of politics, finance, and public finance. This has been Tom Kozlik from Hilltop Securities.